Today, on another Hamster and Gretel episode of the Danville Discussion.
This is so weird. It looks like these people have been...
scared out of their minds?
I was gonna say hypnotized, but your thing is good. And it's gonna stop right now.
No one stops the Nightmarionette!
Wait, the Nightmarionette? What is that?
It's a mashup, Nightmare and Marionette. Put them together, Nightmarionette!
So, are you like a puppet?
No, let me start at the beginning.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Danville Discussion, a podcast about all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. I am your host Caleb Dirksen, and some of you may know me from my YouTube channel of the same name, the one and only place for some web series related to animation such as Caleb Reviews. If this is your introduction to this podcast, well, allow me to explain what it is. You see, this is a podcast, right? Okay, well, get this. This is gonna be totally surprising. It talks about shows set in the Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh universe, otherwise known as the Dwampyverse. Specifically, I'm talking about each episode of either Phineas and Ferb or Hamster and Gretel, and going through all the cultural or in-universe references, fun facts, gags, and anything else that might come up, and then finally, I will end things off with a roller coaster rating for each of those episodes. So, on today's episode, I'm going to be looking into Episode 9 of Hamster and Gretel, which consists of the Nightmarionette and Abuelita's world. If you want to check out more episodes of the Danville Discussion, then log on to anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen, and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion website on Spotify for podcasters. Okay, now before we get started, I want to jump straight into the business of this podcast. So this is something that I've never had the opportunity to do before on the Danville Discussion, but now that I've received some fan feedback for this show outside of the YouTube comments, I might as well start a new segment on the show to open things up. Yes, it's finally time to hear listener feedback. Now, this is an email I got from someone named Jenna. It has the Danville Discussion in the subject line, and she says, "Dear Caleb Dirksen, I just wanted to say that I haven't really listened to your podcast in a while, but when I started listening again, I remembered how amazing it is. Thank you so much for making it." That is so nice. Thank you, Jenna, for that awesome message, and I hope you'll continue to have fun listening to the Danville Discussion as much as I've had fun making it. Now, since she said she hadn't listened in a while, this isn't the first email she sent me in regards to this podcast, as she sent me one at the beginning of last year, also containing the Danville Discussion as the subject, in which she says, "Dear Caleb, I just have one question. Have you ever done a Milo Murphy's Law episode? Because I can't find any. Also, I just wanted to say I absolutely love your podcast. I am completely addicted to Phineas and Ferb, but there aren't many podcasts about it, so I just want to say thank you for doing it." From Jenna. That's a good question you have right there, and for that, don't you worry. I plan to do Milo Murphy's Law in the future, either talking about the holiday specials by the end of this year or later, or after I finish Phineas and Ferb considering its status as a sequel spin-off. I appreciate your patience. Also, I do know some podcasts that talk about Phineas and Ferb other than the Danville Discussion, but they're few and far between right now. There's the 2018 Podcast Without a Cool Acronym, hosted by Chance Ellison and Robert Parker, which is pretty much dead after only 23 episodes about the first season of Phineas and Ferb. And then there's the 2020 Podcast Without a Cool Acronym with Chandler DeRoche, but that talks more about other Disney television animation shows as well. And there's even 104 Days, the Phineas and Ferb companion podcast by Callie and her dad, but that kind of stopped after they talked about Spa Day, the second segment of Season 2, Episode 15, and I don't really know why. But with this podcast, I plan to do everything in the Droppyverse from beginning to end, including Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, and Hamster and Gretel. Unlike those other shows I talked about, I'm not gonna stop anytime soon. I'm gonna go the exploration route of other TV show review podcasts I've listened to, like the Animaniacast, Talking Simpsons, Four Finger Discount, which is another Simpsons review podcast, and the Poidcast, which is a podcast that talks about everything Pinky and the Brain related. And I'm not going to rest until I've done everything that's on the podcast to-do list. Anyways, thank you for those messages and all that feedback that you sent. And if you guys want to submit your feedback on this podcast and have it be read by me on the show, then all you have to do is either submit a review out of 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or send us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with either the Danville Discussion or the episode topic in the subject line. Alright, now with that out of the way, for today's episode, the first thing we have to talk about is when this episode first premiered. And this episode first aired on Disney Channel on Saturday, October 1st, 2022, as part of their Calling All the Monsters block for Halloween, where the Nightmarionette was strangely advertised as a Halloween episode, even though it has barely anything to do with Halloween in any way. Either way, I could still count it sometimes. But anyways, our first segment is the Nightmarionette. And the Nightmarionette was written by Jim Bernstein, storyboarded by Heather Gregerson, Alan Delmar Oka, and Eddie Pittman, and directed by Amber Tornquist Hollinger. The episode begins with Kevin and Gretel looking through their old belongings per request of their parents to donate them. Gretel digs out Talking Tanya, a doll whose head was swapped with a dog's head. Then they both come across Mr. Grumpy Puss, a sock puppet Kevin used to entertain Gretel when they were younger, sometimes whenever Gretel got scared because dumb stuff beats scary stuff. Then Kevin receives a call from Hiromi and talks to her with Mr. Grumpy Puss, but Hiromi doesn't understand him, and Kevin talks to her about Mr. Grumpy Puss and how he used him to entertain Gretel when she was younger, while Hiromi states that she's having an anime mime troupe at the comic shop, offering Kevin to be there, though he declines because he has to help Gretel while getting rid of his childhood. After that call, Kevin and Gretel's trip down memory lane is interrupted when they receive an alert about a bank robbery downtown, and just as Kevin reminds Hamster and Gretel to suit up, they've already suited up, which Kevin will never get used to, and they all arrive at the bank, where Hamster and Gretel investigate the situation while Kevin finds a parking spot, which the first one he finds turns out to be for an elephant parking only.
Come on, parking! Elephant parking?
Don't even think about it.
As the heroes enter, they discover that the people inside the bank have been scared out of their minds by a villain called the Nightmarionette, who can create lifelike projections of his victims' biggest fears. However, Hamster and Gretel are confused and mistake him for a puppet, considering his name is a portmanteau of nightmare and marionette. But the Nightmarionette himself explains his backstory through visual aids, in which he was a neuroscientist working on a way to read people's dreams through electromagnetic waves, and so he invented this scepter that can project highly realistic holograms of people's fears. And yet he is mistaken by Hamster and Gretel for a puppet again because they think his name makes no sense, and just as Gretel declares a puppet punch, the heroes are struck by the Nightmarionette and are subjected to their fears of vacuum cleaners and toaster scorpion hybrid creatures, respectively. Just then, Kevin crashes the minivan into the bank and takes Hamster and Gretel with him to escape, also calling the Nightmarionette a weird puppet guy, which again gets him infuriated. The hero transition, which has a scared Hamster and Gretel, leads back home where Kevin and Fred use their knowledge of immersion therapy to train Gretel to overcome her fear, the fear she had when she was very little to the point of making her vulnerable, while Hamster goes to a pet store to confront his fear, following a news report about the Nightmarionette by Veronica Hill. While the song Immersion Therapy is playing, Gretel starts off pretty much scared of anything related to the toaster-scorpion hybrid, including a scorpion engraved on a piece of toast, and Kevin's toaster-scorpion disguise, but she finally overcomes it when she participates in boxing gymnastics and destroys several decoys of the hybrid creature. Meanwhile, Hamster warns Joni, the pet store owner who used to vacuum around Hamster's cage, never to use the vacuum near him again as he was scared of that. Afterwards, at the Danville Gold Repository, the Nightmarionette proceeds to scare the security guards and a janitor out of their wits and rob the city's gold supply, causing the entire economy to collapse until Gretel flies by and tries to stop him now that she's overcome her fears. And of course, Gretel avoids succumbing to her fear of the toaster scorpion by horseplaying with it, which causes it to disappear. But unfortunately for her, the Nightmarionette overpowers her when he reaches into her unconscious and creates a blender lobster hybrid, which is the chapter that Kevin didn't even think to get through yet. Racked with fear, Gretel flees and hides while Kevin has an idea and looks for a solution in the minivan. Just as Gretel hides behind a pillar and starts to cry in fear, she regains her confidence when Kevin uses Mr. Grumpypuss to entertain her and sprouts tears of joy.
These are creepy.
Hello, Gretel! Gretel, over here! Once upon a time in a magical land of there was a handsome prince who forgot to wear his helmet. Why do you like to use myself?
Now I'm confused. You're a puppet?
At that point, Gretel stands up to the Nightmarionette, explaining how dumb stuff can beat scary stuff, and as she says how dumb an arthropod and kitchen appliance hybrid really is, she floats backwards through the blender lobster hybrid, causing it to disappear, and she summons Hamster as the Nightmarionette's worst nightmare. Hamster punches him out of sight and through the roof and floors of a historic 10-floor shop full of harps, where he himself hangs like a puppet on the strings of those harps and is forced to pay for all of those harps he broke, and the segment ends with Gretel thanking Hamster, Kevin, and Mr. Grumpypuss for helping her out, as well as some references to Walt Disney's Pinocchio, including Hamster as Jiminy Cricket.
You break it, you bought it. And you broke all the harps in the store. Maria, we can finally feed our children. And little Alfonso can finally get his braces off.
It's a miracle.
Yes, little Alfonso got his wish. But most importantly, Gretel learned that there's no problem that knocking a guy into a bunch of harps can't solve.
Wait, where did you get those clothes?
My costume change? That's what stretches your disbelief?
Meh, fair enough.
And now to go over the references. Speaking of Pinocchio, there are some cultural references I spotted. Of course, as a punchline to the Nightmarionette being constantly referred to as a puppet, the ending of the episode, which has the villain stuck in harp strings in a harp store, makes multiple references to the classic 1940 Disney film In a Row, which itself is an animated adaptation to the 1880s novel The Adventures of Pinocchio. The historic district the store is found in resembles the Italian village the story takes place in. The store owner speaks with an Italian accent and looks remarkably similar to Geppetto, and Hamster stares at the moon on top of a hanging sign while wearing an outfit similar to that of Jiminy Cricket, and giving an insightful summary about what Gretel has learned. Now, you know this by now, Walt Disney's Pinocchio from 1940, an instant Disney classic, highly well known especially for giving us When You Wish Upon a Star, which would end up becoming Disney's official anthem. Like, almost every time we would see a new film from Walt Disney Pictures since 1985, we're greeted with an instrumental of When You Wish Upon a Star that accompanies the castle, even on a lot of Pixar films nowadays. I watched that movie countless times on VHS as a kid, and I still have my 1993 Walt Disney Classics VHS to this day, as well as the 1999 60th Anniversary VHS and DVD, and the Signature Collection Blu-ray, since I still love physical media. I know one of the most infamous scenes in the movie is Pleasure Island, where once you do bad things there, you will never come back as a human and will remain a donkey for the rest of your life. I've seen a lot of people placing that among their list of scariest Disney moments, and I can totally see why. And the live-action remake by Robert Zemeckis from 2 years ago? My God, that is yet another reason Disney needs to give up on making more of those god-awful live-action remakes of their animated films. It's so bad. It's right up there with the 2019 Lion King and the 2020 Mulan as one of their worst live-action remakes. Like, it completely missed the point of Pinocchio as a character. Jiminy looks kinda uncanny, though at least his CGI is not quite as bad as the CGI in the Little Mermaid remake, good God! It's now Geppetto's turn to be dead for a short period of time at the end of the movie, and they had the audacity to shove various other Disney references and a poop joke in my face without even trying to be subtle about it. It really made me want to watch Pinocchio: A True Story with Pauly Shore for the first time, because at least that one would be so bad it's enjoyable from what I've heard. But probably the best Pinocchio movie since the Walt Disney version for me has to be the recent Guillermo del Toro stop-motion film on Netflix. It does have a more serious tone compared to the Disney film, but it's got incredible voice acting, a strong story, beautiful stop-motion, and well-written characters. And that one recently got a Blu-ray release from the Criterion Collection, so I'm hoping to have it on my shelf one of these days. Anyways, on to the other references. There is a similar character called the Nightmarionette in the popular horror video game franchise Five Nights at Freddy's, which I didn't know until now since I've only watched some fan-made lost tape videos of Five Nights at Freddy's. Gretel having to fight a toaster scorpion monster and a blender lobster monster to stop the Nightmarionette is similar to how Shiro Kazami, aka Kamen Rider V3, fights monsters based off an animal and an inanimate object to fight the villainous organization Destron in the 1973 Japanese tokusatsu show Kamen Rider V3. And the Nightmarionette's idea to exploit people's fears to commit crimes is similar to the DC Comics supervillain Scarecrow. So for at least one handy tool I found out of my big toolbox of Nightmarionette supplies, I found the naming of the Danville Gold Depository kinda strange, since they confirmed in a previous episode, the opposite of smart, that Hamster and Gretel is set in the tri-state area, same as Phineas and Ferb and Model Murphy's Law. And Dan Povenmire said that the show is set in the same universe as those two, but in a different town. So by this logic, Hamster and Gretel might have headed over to Danville when they tracked the Nightmarionette as he was getting ready to terrorize the depository. Now on to my pros and cons of the episode. First off, I appreciate how this is another instance where Kevin is a good brother to Gretel. Like, you can tell from watching this that Kevin really cares about Gretel's safety with the ways that he tries to help Gretel get over her fears of machine and arthropod hybrid creatures, whether it's through immersion therapy or with Mr. Grumpy Puss, and the episode has plenty of heart because of that. Like, ever since I first watched this segment back when it premiered, this has been one of my go-to Hamster and Gretel episodes for comfort when I feel scared or depressed, since I can easily see myself as Gretel and my older sister as Kevin. It's like watching an 11-minute episode of Bluey for me, and it's definitely my biggest highlight from this episode. It has plenty of other sweet and funny moments as well, like that discussion from Carolina to Gretel about talking Tanya, where after Tanya says, "I need to be changed," Carolina says, "You have been, Muñequita." Like, it continues to show how much of a good mother she is to Gretel.
Oh, I've always loved your dog's head doll. This used to be Talking Tanya, right?
I need to be changed.
Oh, you have been, muñequita.
As well as that gag where Kevin tries to find a parking spot, but as soon as he finds an open spot, he discovers that it's for elephant parking, and the guy riding the elephant behind him says, "Don't even think about it." Though when the parents left the house, I was staring open-mouthed at the screen for a few seconds and burst out laughing hysterically when Hamster said, "Goodbye, boomers." Like, that's an out-of-context moment right there because, like, the "okay boomer" meme is already dated, but I just can't help but find this moment just absolutely hilarious. Another thing that I loved is the Nightmarionette's introduction, including the fourth wall break where as soon as the index card appears on screen and it cuts to the next camera position, Hamster throws it away, as well as Gretel's misbelief that the Nightmarionette himself is a puppet, and the creative design of the puppet punch words where there are strings attached to the word puppet. In addition to that, is another reason for me to appreciate Kevin as a good brother to Gretel, which is when she and Hamster get frightened by the toaster scorpion and Kevin, unable to find parking, bursts the minivan through the wall, shoves them both into the vehicle to save their lives, and says to the Nightmarionette,
Later, you weird puppet guy!
I am not a puppet! I am the puppeteer of fears! They're gone.
Even the Veronica Hill report had funny moments, like when she says that nothing can stop that nightmare-inducing villain from leaving the city's law enforcement officers frozen in terror, and it just shows some human-shaped ice pops in the form of a police officer, a firefighter, and a paramedic, followed by her opinion on the name of the Nightmarionette being confusing because he doesn't appear to be made of wood or to hang from strings, which even Gretel agrees with, and her fear of doing weather because she went to journalism school to become a news reporter and not a meteorologist. Like, these Veronica Hill reports in general are some good running gags to me, to the point that I see her being the Hamster and Gretel equivalent of Kent Brockman from The Simpsons with her sense of humor. The song Immersion Therapy was a pretty good one, and there is a solid fourth wall break where Gretel questions if any of this is really necessary, and Fred says that the guys off screen already wrote the song. Maybe some librarians, but the actual writers of the song are Nicholas Podany and Dan Povenmire.
I know it seems cruel and counterintuitive, but it's beneficial, I swear. This isn't punitive. With things that scare me terribly will certainly take care of me. Immersion therapy.
Is this really necessary?
I mean, they already wrote the song.
And I especially love the ending, which homages one of Disney's best works and also has a good joke where the Nightmarionette is hanging from the harp strings and Gretel now sees that he's a marionette who gives people nightmares.
Thanks for helping me overcome my fears, Mr. Grumpy Puss.
Hey!
And you too, Kevin. Oh, I get it. He's a marionette who gives people nightmares.
No, I'm not a puppet. It's a mashup, like brunch, rom-com, mockumentary.
And then there's the animation, which for this episode was done by Snipple Animation Studios entirely. The animation here is quite solid as their animation for this show has been improving since the first episode. In addition, the movements of the Mr. Grumpy Puss puppet and his googly eyes are decent, even if it would sometimes feel a little choppy. I thought the designs of the anime mimes were cute. There's some good special effects including the Nightmarionette's beams and nightmare projections and strokes for the vacuum suction. The CGI rotation on the minivan was very nice. There's some solid uses of shading and lighting, and the backgrounds are nice and colorful, and they also do a good job emulating the backgrounds from superhero comic books. My only sort of criticisms, though, are that there is one bit where the outlines on the Nightmarionette can feel jarringly thick to me, and some movements can be choppy or flash-like. But this is definitely some of the most fun I've had watching a Hamster and Gretel episode alongside Recipe for Disaster, and also a very heartfelt one with the relationship between Kevin and Gretel. Like, if you've ever had an experience where you felt down or scared, then this episode is a high recommendation, and as someone who has had some depressing or traumatizing experiences in my life, this is easily one of my go-to episodes of the show. Now our next segment is going to be Abuelita's World. And Abuelita's World was written by Joanna Hausman, it was storyboarded by Heather Gregerson, Eric Kling, Alan Delmar Oka, and Eddie Pittman, and it was directed by Amber Tornquist Hollinger. In this one, Dave and Carolina leave Hamster, Kevin, and Gretel at home with Abuelita while they visit the North American Superintendent and Handyman Trade Convention for the weekend. However, the kids are not excited for Abuelita, and Abuelita herself proves to be excessively strict when she forbids Kevin and Gretel from using their cell phones and has them doing chores non-stop while the song Abuela's Rules plays throughout the montage.
Now hand over the phones.
But
No buts unless they are doing chores.
Abuela's rules, they're not open for negotiation. I keep my cool unless I say a need for education about responsibility.
When Fred stops by to ask Kevin and Gretel why they're not answering their phones, Abuelita closes the door on her, telling her that Kevin is not allowed to have girls over, despite the fact that she is literally Kevin's cousin and not just some random girl. However, Fred manages to tell them to watch the news before then, to which Abuelita declines at the moment in favor of continuing to watch her novella. But then the siblings and Hamster turn on the news after Kevin puts Abuela to sleep by feeding her flan, and they learn from a Veronica Hill report that Bob Infanterberg, aka Big Baby, a giant baby who was turned from a disgraced mayoral candidate and is also Veronica's ex-boyfriend, is attacking the city, and they attempt to exit the house to race off on their mission without disturbing Abuelita. However, their efforts are complicated when Abuelita insists that she go with them downtown via the bus, and Gretel worries that Abuelita will never forgive her if she finds out that she's actually a superhero. When the heroes arrive to the scene, much to their shock, Abuelita confronts Infanterberg for terrorizing the city, and Big Baby explains his backstory to her, but then he picks her up and carries her off to the top of a totally tool skyscraper. To avoid harming Abuelita, Gretel, through Kevin's guidance, distracts Infanterberg by using a giant maraca as a baby rattle, rescues Abuelita, and places Infanterberg in a makeshift crib using the beams on a giant truck, while Hamster takes a huge pacifier from the exterior of the shop and sticks it in Big Baby's mouth. After Gretel and Hamster return in their regular clothes, Abuelita tells Kevin off for letting her go to the bathroom in the middle of the battle unattended when they notice the Action News van that Infanterberg had thrown earlier about to fall on them, and the two end up forced to reveal their superhero identities to Abuelita when they save her from being crushed by the van. Abuelita reassures her grandchildren that they did the right thing by breaking her rules for the sake of saving the city, and promises to keep their identities a secret from Dave and Carolina, and that is that for Abuelita's World.
Look at this mess! You broke all of Abuelita's rules! But sometimes you have to break some rules to do the right thing.
Huh?
I am very proud of both of you.
Wait, you're not mad?
Shocked? Yes. Confused? Yes. But no, I could never be mad at you for doing the right thing. You saved my life. Twice.
We couldn't have done it without you, Abuelita.
You even stood up to him without powers.
Well, children need tough love, but mostly they need regular love.
Oh, and Mom and Dad don't know anything about this, so maybe we just...
Say no more. I'm good at keeping secrets. Your mother doesn't know about my life as a go-go dancer before she was born.
Things we didn't need to know.
Agreed.
Now, I was able to find a couple references in this episode. For a cultural reference, Big Baby carries Abuelita to the top of a skyscraper just like King Kong in the 1933 classic film King Kong. And for an in-universe reference, that skyscraper, of course, was a Totally Tool store, which makes another appearance in Hamster and Gretel. As I mentioned when I reviewed Okie Dokie, where it made a prior appearance, Totally Tools was first used in the Phineas and Ferb episode Perry the Octopus. And now, since I can't find any handy tools out of my toolbox of Abuelita's World supplies, other than this is the first appearance of Abuelita, I might as well get to the pros and cons. Now, I do like the comedy in this episode, such as the opening gag of Dave and Carolina talking about the North American Superintendent and Handyman Trade Convention.
You know what they say?
What happens at the North American Superintendent and Handyman Trade Convention stays at the North American Superintendent and Handyman Trade Convention.
Who says that?
They do?
Who's they?
The North American
Got it! Well, parental units.
And the flan joke where Kevin says he has a flan, but Gretel tries to correct it that he has a plan, and the hero transition shows Kevin and Gretel with flan dessert, as well as Veronica Hill's report about Bob and Fantaberg, and even that one part where Abuelita is watching her novella with Kevin and Gretel sitting next to her, and she says that the novella is about an innocent brother and sister who are being punished by a mean old woman. I think that's pretty much a close to accurate description of this episode, because Kevin and Gretel are being bossed around to the extreme by their abuela, and believe me, I'll talk more about her later after I've gotten most of the positives out of the way. Next, I thought Big Baby's backstory was kinda funny, trying to make himself young and tall with more hair after losing the mayoral campaign, only to accidentally turn himself into a giant baby. And the King Kong reference was a nice touch, especially thanks to Gretel flying around Big Baby and the building like those airplanes, and there is some heart by the end of the episode, where Abuelita says, sometimes you have to break the rules to do the right thing. However, there is one thing holding this episode back for me in terms of writing. I know some might find this sacrilegious, but my big criticism with this episode in particular is Abuelita herself. Whether I was watching this since its premiere or for this review, I could not get by how overly strict and abusive she seemed. Like, I know she does show that she loves her grandchildren throughout, but whatever rules she had for them by confiscating their cell phones, making them do all the chores for her constantly while not allowing them to use any of today's modern technology to do them, and making them watch what she wants to watch, that practically seems like child abuse to me, especially considering me and my sister were treated terribly by our parents as kids. Like, we weren't allowed to use the dishwasher to wash our dishes, I wasn't allowed to use my computer or my other electronics for long periods of time, even if it's meant for work on my creator projects, and we weren't even allowed to listen to any explicit music or watch stuff like The Simpsons with or without parental supervision, like it's a crime against humanity or an affront to God. Like, even this song Abuela's Rules was easily relatable for me personally, and I like it just for that alone, considering my stressful childhood. And I'm sure many Latina people can relate as well, since I did talk about this episode with some other people in a Dwampyverse Discord server.
Don't give me that look, don't get defensive. We hang all the clothes, the dryer's expensive, and we do not use the dishwasher to arm the dishwasher.
Abuela's rules,
they're not open for negotiation. I keep my cool unless I see a need for education about responsibility.
But yeah, even if she loves Kevin and Gretel as her grandchildren, I was close to not being able to stand Abuelita for her extremely strict personality, so much so that she makes Elena Rivera from Pixar's Coco and Alma Madrigal from Encanto look less strict for Disney grandmothers in comparison. In fact, as Gretel said it best,
she's like a villain whose superpower is scaring love into us.
Look, I know this is bad, but at least we're having more fun than Mom and Dad.
I love tools!
But at least her performance by Jenny Lorenzo is good. Like, she does an excellent job sounding like an actual Latina grandmother, since she herself is of Latin American descent, namely from Cuba. But now for the animation, which again was done entirely by Snipple Animation Studios. And like the previous segment, they did do a decent job here, like the action scenes between the heroes and Big Baby, the squash and stretch uses, such as Kevin falling onto the bed as a result of feeling tired of Abuelita's rules, the shading and lighting, and the motion of Abuelita swinging her cane at the beginning of the song. However, while I do see how Snipple has improved over the course of the show, I still have a few things to criticize, like when Abuelita says this is Abuelita's house now, her mouth feels stiff, and her teeth barely clutch together, and there are some times when the movements slip off, thus feeling choppy. So this episode was okay. But not one I would necessarily return to, honestly, but you be the judge. Give it a watch and see it for yourself. And with that, I think we are ready to get to our roller coaster rating. Now, for my roller coaster rating, I give the Nightmarionette 9.5 roller coasters full of Mr. Grumpy Puss puppets out of 10. I thought it was a really good episode with plenty of heart and great humor, and I'm willing to add this to my list of episodes to watch when I'm not feeling well. And as for Abuelita's World, I would give it 6 Big Baby themed roller coasters out of 10. It does have a bit of heart by the end, but I thought the episode could have been better if Abuelita didn't come off as rather abusive early on, especially as someone who was abused when I was younger. And like, before anyone asks, I know I gave Empower Failure and Okie Dokie 7 roller coasters out of 10, but still, I have some mixed feelings for both the pilot and this segment in particular, where the pilot has rushed pacing and rough animation, and this one has a not-so-likable grandmother who goes a little too far with her rules. So yeah, 6 roller coasters out of 10 for Abuelita's World. So in the end, I give the whole episode 8 roller coasters out of 10. I do think the Nightmarionette is the better segment out of the two, and I don't really know if I would watch Abuelita's World again, but you be the judge when it comes to the latter segment. And that is all that I'm going to be talking about right now, so thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Danville Discussion. As for me, you can find me on my Facebook page at Real Caleb Dirksen, on my Tumblr and TikTok pages at Caleb Dirksen2 with the number 2 at the end and all in lowercase, on Instagram at Caleb.Dirksen for my main page, or at Caleb Flynn Fletcher for my alternate page, on Threads at Caleb.Dirksen, on DeviantArt at CalebDirksen20, and on BlueSky at CalebDirksen2.bsky.social. You can also find me on Discord by entering the username Caleb Dirksen, all in one word and all in lowercase. And if you go to the invite link in the description below, it'll also invite you to my Discord server so that you can talk with me about anything, including this podcast or my other content. You can also find me on YouTube, just search for Caleb Dirksen and look for the icon of me as a soldier. And if you want to give the most support for this podcast and get some great rewards, such as getting access to new episodes 1 to 2 days early, then please consider joining me at patreon.com/Caleb Dirksen. Special thanks to everyone who has followed or supported me on Patreon, including Kalela Shaw, Sue Friend, Brock Clifton Friend, and my free patrons Gilbert Dan, Alec the Videomaker, Juan Almendarez, Ronnie Whitfield, and Matheson Mullen. It really means a lot to me. As for this podcast, we are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and you can also find us on Spotify for podcasters by using your Apple or Android device or going on the web at anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen, and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion page on Spotify for podcasters. If you liked what you've been listening to and you'd like to help us get discovered, then please hit that subscribe button on the podcast page. Please rate and review this show with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and please tell your friends about it. That would mean the world to me. And if you were watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube Music, then go and press that like button on our video and leave us a little comment with your thoughts on this episode of Hamster and Gretel. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions by sending us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with either the Danville Discussion or the episode topic in the subject line. Join us next time, and I'm going to do something special for this podcast, in which I'm going to be doing a live episode. Yes, join me this Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain on my Twitch channel at CalebDirksen20 or my YouTube live feed, and I'll be doing a special live news episode where I'll be covering the latest news that has happened in Phineas and Ferb and Hamster and Gretel over the course of the summer. Tune in next time for the newest episode of the Danville Discussion with all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. And with that said, thank you guys once again for listening, and until next time, this is Caleb, over and out. This podcast was created strictly and only for entertainment and information purposes. It is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company, Disney Television Animation, or their affiliates. All and any names, images, clips, sounds, or other items related to Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, Hamster and Gretel, and other Disney properties are trademarks and or copyrights of their respective holders. All original content from this podcast is the intellectual property of the Danville Discussion and the host or hosts running the podcast, unless otherwise noted.
Yes, little Alfonso got his wish. But most importantly, Gretel learned that there's no problem that knocking a guy into a bunch of harps can't solve.
Wait, where did you get those clothes?
My costume change? That's what stretches your disbelief?
Meh, fair enough.